Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming. My name is Jeremy Burton, and I am the Executive Director of the Jewish Community Relations Council. As Jews, we know the experience of being the refugee very well. And as the United States has both closed and opened its doors to us in the past, we believe that this country has the moral responsibility and the capacity to welcome refugees and asylum seekers. Over the last decade, our Jewish community here in Boston has come together time and again to take action to support refugees and asylum seekers who are looking for safety and security in our country. We at the Jewish Community Relations Council, JCRC, have led efforts with our network and our partners to support asylum seekers coming from Central America. We watched as thousands of Afghans desperately tried to flee perilous conditions and escape to safety this last year. And together with our partners, we have built a comprehensive network welcoming Afghan immigrants and refugees into our community. As of now, we at JCRC have organized over 30 congregational support teams that have welcomed more than 180 Afghan families and individuals who escaped Kabul last summer. We have some of those partners with us here today, and I'm delighted to welcome three amazing people who inspire me and challenge me to share their experiences and those of our Afghan neighbors. I'd like to welcome JCRC's own Director of Synagogue Organizing, Rachel Lewis, Rav Chazan Aliza Berger from Temple Emmanuel in Newton, and Kelly Marah, Director of Pastoral Care of the St. John St. Paul Catholic Collaborative. You can see their full bios on our website, and we'll link to them in the chat. And before we begin, a reminder as always, for those of you who've been with us before, that you can throw your questions into the Q&A and we'll try to get to as many of them as possible. Rachel will start us off and give us a sense of the lay of the land. And then we'll hear from Kelly and Aliza about what they are seeing on the ground. Rachel?
Thanks so much, Jeremy. It's so good to be with all of you today. Many of us have been in this work together for the past several months and have had many of these conversations, and some of you are new to this conversation, and it's great to have that mix. So I want to step back a little bit and give everybody a 30,000-foot view of where we are. So as we all know, at the end of last August, there were many flights out of Kabul taking people to safety in the US and in other parts of the world. And about 70,000 Afghan individuals, but some were members of families, some were traveling on their own and weren't able to come with the rest of their families, ended up on 9 different army bases throughout the United States. And since September, the government has been working to send many of those folks to different communities around the country to be resettled. But 70,000 people is a lot of people for a refugee resettlement infrastructure that has been really decimated over the past several years. And so another challenge that our whole system was really dealing with when this crisis occurred was that resettlement agencies were not staffed up in the ways that they needed to be for normal refugee resettlement, which requires case management, which requires all kind of different resources. And so it was very clear that refugee resettlement agencies were going to need additional support. And here in Boston, JCRC got connected to our wonderful partners at Catholic Charities and Jewish Family Services of Metro West to figure out how we could support the work that needed to be done to resettle so many people here in the greater Boston area. And one of the reasons that we were able to do this work as JCRC is that we have this history and this past of organizing many, many synagogues and faith communities around all kinds of different social justice efforts, but certainly in the past many years around immigration efforts. And we have been engaged in efforts to support asylum seekers in immigration detention over the past few years. We've helped to create some sanctuary networks to support families who had been resisting deportation. And we also know that other organizations in our Jewish community have been doing some really impactful work too. Jewish Family Services had built a network of synagogues several years ago to support Syrian refugee families as well. So with all of these pieces together, we were really well situated to help bring congregations into this work. And over the past it feels like a very long time, but I think it's been really 4 months. We have worked with Catholic Charities, with JFS, to build about 35 different teams. Most of those are congregations that sort of stand alone, that are doing this work within their congregations, that have built amazing teams, and we're going to hear from some of those partners today. Some of those teams are coalitions of different congregations that came together to do support work when they didn't feel like they could do it alone. And each congregation has sponsored a family, or in some cases 2 families, or groups of individuals who they're able to bring together, offer housing to, and build communities of support around. And it's been really quick. This work has happened really, really fast. It needed to happen really fast. The speed at which this has happened, it has made things challenging. And the key to really being able to face those challenges have been just the amazing leadership and resilience of these teams who have welcomed people in very, very difficult circumstances into their lives and into their communities, and offered support. And you're going to hear some really wonderful stories and examples of this from Eliza and from Kelly, which I'm very excited for you to hear. But I just want to say that I think what they will really show all of us is that there's no one story. There's no one story of particular families or individuals who were forced to leave Afghanistan. When a country is falling apart, there are so many different reasons why people will need to leave. And they could be from urban areas, they could be from rural areas, they could be Pashto speakers, Dari speakers, maybe have some English, maybe have no English, maybe never had formal education that allowed them to become literate. There are so many different types of families that we see, and types of individuals that we have seen. And to see our Jewish community, our multi-faith community, really come and collect around all of these folks who we have now welcomed into our lives and our communities has been really, really beautiful. And it's taken a lot of work. And the fact that we are able to do this work together. We've worked to build a network where congregational teams are able to reach out to one another. JCRC, Catholic Charities, JFS run bi-weekly meetings with our teams, so that we can make sure that we're sharing all the information and updates that we need. But being able to do this work as one large faith community, one large Jewish community, has been incredibly moving to see. And we're so glad to be able to share more of that work with you today.
Thanks, Rachie. I'm going to invite Kelly to come in now. And Kelly, if you could speak to us, what motivated the members of your parish to get involved? How has your community risen to this moment?
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you all. Thank you, JCRC, for welcoming me here so warmly today. I think I would be remiss in starting in not noting something particularly unique about this resettlement effort that we're all involved in some particular way, to help our Muslim brothers and sisters from Afghanistan. A partnership with the might and the expertise of the Jewish community, partnered with their philanthropy, and the infrastructure of Catholic Charities, and then, of course, most importantly, the communities of faith across Massachusetts, providing boots on the ground to support these primarily Muslim individuals. This is a global fraternity in action. It is what it means to be a citizen of the world and a good steward of it. So I think in terms of motivation, from my congregation's perspective, that is exactly it. It's a noting of all of our inherent human dignity. So again, my name is Kelly Murat, and I'm the Director of Pastoral Care for 2 large Catholic parishes here in Wellesley, We minister to over 4,000 registered faithful in our area. I've been involved in resettlement work with Catholic Charities for over 3 years as a power parish, parishes organized to welcome immigrants and refugees. This work is fundamental to who we are in our Catholic identity, dedicated to a Catholic social teaching of welcoming the stranger and providing to the least and most marginalized among us the same dignity and respect we would offer to God himself. One of the most remarkable experiences I had in a resettlement effort was on March 14th, 2020, when we, our parish, welcomed a Rwandan family into Boston Logan Airport on what was literally one of the very last flights in through Boston before lockdown. This family had spent 13 years in a refugee camp in the Congo, and 4 of their 6 children were actually born there. Their process to apply and succeed in achieving refugee status took that long. When they arrived here, they came with flip-flops and t-shirts and literally the most grateful smiles we've ever seen. Dad and I struggled to communicate about their tastes in food, their clothing, everything, all of their needs, anything you could possibly imagine in my broken Anglo-Canadian French and his African French. Needless to say, lots of mistakes were made, but this family's gratitude continued as we navigated resettlement efforts layered with the intricacies of a new COVID lockdown landscape. Our volunteers would literally leave bags of groceries outside of their door, ring their doorbell, and watch them with grateful tears in their eyes as they brought the bags into the apartment from a significant social distance. We journeyed with this family on a path to self-sufficiency for over a year, and they very much became a part of our faith family. Their eldest daughter is now in her first year undergraduate degree in psychology. In early November, we welcomed an Afghani refugee family from Kabul. Dad, mom, a 2-year-old boy, and a 12-month-old girl. I was reminded when I arrived at the airport and met this family at the gate, the universality of children of being a parent, because this little 2-year-old arrived at the gate and we went to the luggage carousel, and it was an absolute struggle full of laughter to not have this little boy climbing up onto the carousel. I'm sure after a long flight from a military base where they had been stationed since early August, mid-August, that luggage carousel probably looked like a carnival ride. Our volunteers fell in love with this family immediately. We learned in the first week of their arrival that mom's sister had been resettled to the San Francisco area and that they were eager to get there as soon as possible and most definitely to avoid a New England winter. So at that point, our volunteers had to pivot their expectations. For example, instead of focusing on finding employment and mass healthcare, which are typically high priorities for refugee resettlement, we rather focused on English lessons, making sure the fridge was stocked, childcare for the kids so mom could have some relief, and helping with their flights and their accommodations and ultimately their housing in California. For our power group, we realized that support for this family meant being and bringing them closer to their family. And although there was lots of sadness in bringing them to the airport in January, we were relieved that the family could be reunited. A short week and a half later, we picked up 3 adult men who had been temporarily staying in a hotel while more permanent housing could be secured for them. We moved them into a furnished apartment the family was living in. And these men range from ages 21 through 25, and they could not be more eager to master what they already have as impressive English skills and to find employment. They are so motivated. They have mastered public transportation. They are hosting fellow refugees for dinner parties in their apartment community. They are active with Jewish Vocational Services for their English and vocational training. It's really remarkable. So to close, I just want to emphasize the flexibility with which we are all required to respond in refugee work. Refugee resettlement is always a call to respond. It's a call to respond to the global need for hospitality for the displaced. It's to respond to the radical need of 26.4 million refugees across the world. A response to our communities, our faith communities, in small ways and large ways. And perhaps most, the response with the biggest impact is responding to the needs of an individual or family right here who need your help. It is far too easy amidst this massive global catastrophe to find ourselves paralyzed by the magnitude of the challenge. But Refugee resettlement is a call to respond person by person and never allowing the vastness of the challenge to overwhelm or discourage. It's a challenge to never give way to complacency about the future. And it's a call to be motivated by urgency and not enslaved by despair or cynicism. A single encounter can radically change the lives of hundreds of people if it is performed with humility and a heart for service. There is significant power to be found in telling these stories, so these sorts of forums are just so important, and they just might inspire other communities, other individuals to help and take up this challenge. So again, I just thank you so much for being so warm and inviting to me today. It has been a delight, and I'm eager to answer any questions there might be at the end. So thank you again.
Great, thank you, Kelly. We're off to quite a start here. So Rev Berger, why don't you join in this conversation and talk to us about what motivated members of Temple Emmanuel and yourself to get involved, and how the Temple Emmanuel community has risen to this moment.
Thank you so much for having me, and it's just such an incredible gift getting to work with you. JCRC is just an incredible organization, and what an incredible blessing to be able to engage in this work. I want to locate us first just in the experience of being Jewish, because we carry in our DNA the experience of being exiled, the experience of being pushed out of our homes and driven to foreign lands where we don't speak the language and don't understand how things work. And if our ancestors were lucky, there were people there to welcome them. But far too many were not lucky in that way. And so we carry this deep sense of dislocation trauma. And it is our sacred mission, right? In healing that work, what we can do is pay it forward. So I believe that as a Jew, it is really important for us to engage with this work of welcoming refugees, of welcoming immigrants, of being present for those who have been driven from their homes, who are looking for safety and security and community. And we know deeply what it means to provide that community. And in doing so, it's not only an opportunity for us to be kind in this moment, to do the right thing in this moment, but I do think it also affects a generational healing. That it's a tikkun for our past experiences of pain and trauma, and that I think is worth it's so much. And so that has been core to our community's approach to welcoming immigrants. We started with a Syrian family, I think in 2016, 2017, a Syrian family of 5. And that family was hosted by a family here of Holocaust survivors. The grandmother is literally in our sanctuary every single day pre-COVID. Now she watches on live stream, but every single day saying Kaddish for her loved ones who were lost in Auschwitz. And her children have welcomed into their home now 4 different families, starting with the Syrian family of 5, welcoming 2 families from Central America. And just recently they were a host for actually a different team's family, and had the sweet encounter of the Syrian family that they hosted coming back to welcome this new family and share with them how things work in their home. We as a community worked with this Syrian family of 5. Then we sponsored an LGBTQ activist from Uganda, a man who reported about challenges in Rwanda. And now we have 2 families from Afghanistan, a family of 5, 2 parents, a 5-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a little infant who was born actually here on their way to Boston, and another young couple who's expecting their first in May. The experience of doing this work is one of profound connection. We, as a part of doing this, get to connect with a reality that is not ours. Our family comes from the far north of Afghanistan, where a tiny percentage of families have access to electricity or to running water. They come from a place where there are totally different cultural norms, including how you interact, including, can people of this gender speak to people of this gender in terms of politeness, what is considered polite. We've done all sorts of learning around what we consider to be just norms of relating, for instance, smiling, and discovering that there are different traditions around the world. And that brings with it a sense of deep humility and an awareness that what we think we know, we don't actually know. And I think it prepares us to really encounter all of the people in our lives. Our team is made up of a core team. We have about 10 super dedicated volunteers who are on our calls every week, going into every detail of how to support these families, thinking about medical care and education and job support and cultural support and acclimation to Boston. We also have a larger extended team of about 170 volunteers. And those are volunteers that are showing up to offer rides and take the little kids sledding and come over and go over English. We've had just incredible moments of surprise and delight. The 5-year-old now knows her ABCs super well and is proud to say them for any single person who wants to ask. She just recently, this past week, had the delightful opportunity. They welcomed another Afghan little boy into her kindergarten class. And she was apparently showing him around and teaching him the ropes and explaining how things go. She has all of a week more experience in this school than he does, but she's got it down. I think that there's also one other element, which I think as a mostly affluent community, there's a really important learning too for us in the social safety nets that exist and in the challenges that anyone who is experiencing poverty in this country faces. The fact that our volunteers who speak fluent English go to the store and are confounded by WIC benefits and what is covered and what isn't covered. And WIC, for those who don't know, is a benefit offered to new mothers that covers very specific brands of peanut butter or infant formula or cereal. Understanding the benefits that our families are entitled to helps us to be aware of the challenges that so many people in our community are facing and awakens for us not only this need to be present for immigrants in our midst, but also to recognize that our social safety nets are insufficient to support the people that are most in need. And our deepest hope and prayer is that as we do this work of welcoming, Kelly, as you so beautifully said, welcoming our Muslim brothers and sisters from Afghanistan, that we are also awakening in ourselves the awareness to help us do the important work that is necessary to help all who are here have a good quality of life, a happy quality of life, and that we have the tools and skills to build the kinds of resilience communities that will guide us all forward.
Thank you all. I feel like I'm just like overwhelmed with feeling a sense of inspiration by the kind of work that you're all doing and the fact that there are hundreds of volunteers in your congregation and the communities doing this work with you. Kelly opened up, and Eliza, you just picked up on it with this, noting the element of the interfaith partnership here, Christians and Jews working together, largely supporting and assisting Muslim families. I'm curious, I mean, you each talked, and Rachel, you also, all of you, I want to have this conversation. You each talked about the specific work your congregations are doing. I'm curious to what extent this work has deepened relationships across congregations with one another, across multiple diverse communities, for yourself, for the members of your congregations you're working with, and in this broader network that has been built. Anyone wants to go first? I'm not gonna. You can unmute yourself. Sorry.
I can start by just saying I like to talk about the might of the church ladies, because the church ladies can run the world if we gave them the keys. They really could. And my two church ladies are named Barbara and Barbara. They are the head of our power committee. And Barbara are on Rachel's calls every other Friday, and they are a part of this community in such a remarkable way. And the way that you talked, Elisa, about the expansion of the way we think about our preconceived notions about people, when we take those every other Friday opportunities to talk about the ways that we can serve people, it expands our own idea of who we are as Christians, of who we are as Jews, as what a Muslim is, and what does the face of a Muslim look like. It challenges every preconceived notion we might have. And so I have watched, even watching the Barbaras engage in this dialogue, it's been amazing. What an education we've all had, but specifically them sharing that that experience with our team has just been remarkable. I am a strong proponent, and this actually is one of the mantles of the Holy Father, of Pope Francis right now, of if we want to expand the way we are as a global community, we need to encounter one another in a really intimate way. We can't change minds, guys. We can change hearts. And you're only going to do that with encounter, real live encounter. And I think that's what's happening, which is kind of amazing.
There are so many connections that we have made as a result of this work, starting with mosques in the area and our volunteers who have been in touch with mosques, and we now have friends in all these different mosques who are able to guide us and share with us. Translators. There's this amazing app called Tarjimli, where you can press a button and say, you're in a moment. Our family doesn't speak a lot of English, and certain members speak no English, although now they speak a few words, but we need translators to do anything really meaningfully with our families. And with Tarjimli, we have met people from all over the world. There's Abduls and Shabirs and Saids, and it's this amazing technology that puts you in touch with someone you literally never would have encountered. And always in these translation moments, I'm tempted to stop all what we're doing and just ask this person, who are you and what inspired you to donate your time connecting with communities across the world? We've forged relationships. One of our core volunteers, Abby, has been in touch with, there's another subset of Afghan refugees who are being resettled outside of CCAB, outside of JCRC, and the way that they're being resettled is very different. There's no core team of volunteers around them. They are placed in a housing situation. Some are better than others. Some are very challenged, provided with the bare necessities, and sometimes those are very bare necessities. And then they are just sort of expected to make it work with their caseworker. And so Abby has been working with a volunteer with one of the local mosques who's been extremely helpful. And we're now trying to think about how we help those families who don't have a core team of volunteers. But all of these interactions are opportunities for us. And I think we all, especially in the wake of COVID, especially in the light of the racial awakening that our country is going through, we all deeply see the value of making these relationships and having a goal that is to help people. Kelly, as you say, creates an organic and natural and beautiful opportunity to make deep heart connections that I think enrich us beyond, the work that we're doing. There are opportunities for friendship, and it's really such a blessing to build those friendships and those connections. And I'm excited to see how those evolve through the years when, God willing, the families that we're supporting have been permanently settled and granted permanent status here in the United States, and we can begin thinking about who to support next.
I also just want to share that in addition to some of the beautiful, social and spiritual ways that our communities have come together and come to know each other, the ability to share resources and infrastructure across our faith institutions, whether that be the congregations, whether that be JCRC, JFS, Catholic Charities, JVS, Jewish Vocational Services. There are so many ways in which we've all really benefited from this larger network of resources and support. There are ways that us in the Jewish community have learned a great deal, both from Jewish Family Services, from what they put together several years ago for the Syrian refugees, but also from Catholic Charities for this amazing power program that has existed for a long time. And knowing that just as we have a long history of having opened our doors to different immigrant families and individuals, that the Catholic communities locally have as well. And so being able to really harness those connections, that wisdom, learning so much from, Margine Perhat from Catholic Charities, from Lucia Panicella at JFS, we've really been able to put so many of our own resources resources and institutions together to be able to benefit this broader network. And I think about this amazing woman, Mary, from a Catholic church in Dedham, who's basically become like the real estate agent for our whole network. When someone needs to find an apartment, people both in the Catholic churches and in the synagogues are able to get some support from her. I think about the way that some of the support teams are really made up of different congregations from different backgrounds who are really able to bring both their own spiritual grounding, but also the people in their communities, the connections, the social networking, the job opportunities together in order to best serve all of these Afghan folks who've arrived. So there's certainly also just an infrastructure element that allows us to maximize what is possible and what all of the folks that we are supporting are able to have access to.
Thank you all. There are a whole bunch of questions coming in. We'll try to get to some of them. I'm noting that there are people from around the country who have joined us today. And so just by a point of translation or accessibility, we're using a lot of acronyms for organizations, and I'll just say JFS is Jewish Family Service, which is an agency of our Federation community, and JVS is Jewish Vocational Service, another one of our agency partners. I think those are the two I've heard so far acronym today, but if anybody used any others, feel free to loop back around. And speaking of people around the country and people who are like watching this and like, what can we learn? How can we do this? I want to come back to, and Kelly, you use the term flexibility. And that's a great term. And I'm really curious for all of you, what has been challenging, what you've learned, if somebody's sitting here watching from somewhere else and like, I want to start doing this in my community, like, what are the things we didn't know day one that we can impart to them as they're thinking about this work?
Well, I would say just to start, I think the most challenging from my perspective, having been involved in the resettlement of, I believe now 4 groups of people in some sort of iteration. The most challenging piece has been housing, finding a safe, affordable, because ultimately the goal of refugee resettlement, as I understand it, is the path to self-sufficiency, is being able to provide a home for someone that ultimately they would be able to afford to sustain themselves. And so housing has been one of the massive challenges. It's very difficult to find landlords who are willing to not necessarily have a credit history available, or if there isn't a cosigner available, things like that. There's a lot of flexibility required of a landlord there. So that's been one of the biggest challenges. I think challenging, again, our own preconceived notions of what a refugee is as well. We, with our family who we resettled from Kabul, we had, one of our volunteers came up with a beautiful welcome package with prayer rugs and a copy of the Quran, and we had all of this available. We had all of specific meat, halal meat, and everything, and literally we got in, and I said, we settled the family, and I said, is there anything that we can get you? And Mom said, do you have any Coca-Cola? And we literally kind of went, what? Well, we didn't see that coming. So again, being able to pivot, and this is a word that's just ridiculously overused in now of our COVID landscape, but being able to pivot and understand that if we were all resettling somewhere, us as Americans, they would make sure that McDonald's cheeseburgers would be on the table for us when we arrived, and that's probably not necessarily what we necessarily would want. So being able to pivot and be flexible is just the most integral piece.
I would say another piece is that I think another preconceived notion that a lot of people have had is, who's coming? Who are the families that are coming? A mom, a dad who probably worked for the U.S. military with some kids that are going to go to school, and it turns out that there are just so many different kinds of people and different family structures, and a lot of people who were the only people in their family to be able to even make it out of Kabul that we need to support. And I have been really, really struck by the amount of communities that were able to, in your words, Kelly, pivot, including in your congregation so quickly to, instead of supporting a family that they were expecting, to supporting, in many cases, men who came here alone. And at a certain point, the portal of people coming from the bases through Catholic Charities as the official resettlement agency, most of the people that were coming as of mid-December were these men, were single men, not really single because many of them have families back in Afghanistan. And there are several congregations who right away said, we can pivot, we can support these guys. We know that we are here to really just welcome whoever we need to welcome. And I am so moved and like grateful to all of those congregations that have really stepped up to do something that I think was different from what they originally imagined. And it has allowed us to start to find, a few different houses in the same community so that some of these guys are able to really live in community with each other. The three guys that Kelly mentioned before, they are living in an area where there are about 12 other guys who are now living there and able to befriend each other, support each other, go to work together, share resources around work, around English classes. And so I think one of the biggest challenges that I saw that I feel like people really stepped up to was, what do you do when the image of who you think is coming isn't who you're asked to support? And we're all just here to say yes to the people in front of us. And we've seen that in droves in this network.
Berger, anything you have to say about the flexibility?
Yeah. What I would add is that one of the things that we have to be willing to interrogate is our sense of what is. So for instance, we as Americans think of our family as our sort of nuclear family, right? Parents and children, and that's it. And an extended family does not live together. Our family came to us, we initially were placed with the family of 5, and then found out that they had a brother and a sister-in-law that had been placed on the Cape. And they told us that they wanted to live together. And we thought together, like, okay, together we'll put you, we have a community member who generously offered to open their home to the couple here in Newton, and the other family is in Brookline, and that's close enough. And we can figure out volunteers to get them back and forth, and they'll at least get to visit each other. And the family said, no, we live together. And here we have a standard. If you ask a landlord how many people can live in a unit, there are rules and regulations, and you can only have this many people and this many square feet and this many bathrooms. And so one of the things that took us a while was processing what our sense of what is nice for this family versus what their sense of what is nice is. And ultimately, the community members who had opened this apartment for the original family welcomed also this additional couple. And so now both families are living together in the same apartment, which makes them so happy. And I think that kind of awareness that what we think of as what's right, we had a similar tiny incident with balloons. Our family came in at the end of Shabbat, and typically we don't buy things on Shabbat. So we had bought balloons ahead of Shabbat, which we thought would last, but they somehow the helium got all deflated. And we get to the airport to welcome these little girls, and these balloons were the saddest things you have ever seen. They were just like wompy and just so sad on the ground, dragging on the ground. And I was like, let's just get rid of the balloons. Like, they're just not nice balloons. There's no way. And then another volunteer was like, no, let's see how they feel about it. And the girls were so obsessed with these balloons that were on the ground that, from our American standards, not great balloons, but for them were just really exciting. And so I think we have to adapt what we think of as right. We have to be constantly asking. I want to also just pick up, Jeremy, you had asked sort of if you're watching from around the country and you want to jump into this work. And I just want to say that none of us know what we're doing here. It's all very much muddling through and trying to figure out, and every day is a new day. And even if you've settled other families, this is totally different. And even if you think you've managed all the things that could come up, there's a new thing on the horizon that's going to totally confound you. And so none of us know. All of us are doing our best and making the best with what we've got. And so I would encourage anyone who wants to get involved to pick up the phone and call a mass, to pick up a phone. If you're here in Boston, it's really easy. You can call JCRC and they will help you, or any of the congregations who are already involved. But just know that there's no one right way of doing this, and that anything you do with a good heart makes a difference and can be a wonderful opportunity for both you and for these families.
Thank you all. I've got a whole bunch of questions piling up here, and some of them are about the stories and the work you're doing, but there are also some technical questions, and I think people are just really interested to understand more. One of them, and maybe I'll direct this to Rachel, or you tell me if this should go to somebody else, is to explain the process by which refugees are arriving, how they're brought into connection with the congregations. I know that you referenced some of the human service partners before. So could we just take a few minutes to explain the technical process by which somebody who is waiting at Kabul airport to get out in September is now with a congregation here in Massachusetts?
Yeah, so once all of the 70,000 people who ended up on bases in the US, got their spots on planes in all kinds of different ways, and they arrived here, they started to sort of enter this pipeline of being connected to various communities, resettlement agencies across the country. In many cases, people were connected to Massachusetts or wherever it might have been because they had a US tie here. So in some cases that was a cousin, in some cases it was their cousin's old barber who they thought if they had somebody's phone number, it would allow them to be, to sort of like be at the top of the line. And so in many ways, people got sent to where they were sent to because of US ties. But if that was not the case, then it was really random. It had to, the way that families and individuals got connected to Massachusetts, to certain resettlement agencies, was really just based on resettlement agencies all giving particular numbers. So some of you might have seen there was a number initially of 1,000 Afghan evacuees coming to Massachusetts, and now it's around 2,000. That number comes from resettlement agencies, and Catholic Charities and JFS, Jewish Family Services, are 2 of 9 working in Massachusetts. Those numbers were based on what every resettlement agency said that they could handle. So this is all, a congregation does its part, a resettlement agency does its part, state does its part, and slowly but surely you get to 70,000 people being able to be resettled across the country. And the way that congregations have been involved is that once Kelly's congregation, once Elise's congregation had housing available, they said to me, they said to Margine at Catholic Charities or Lucia at JFS, we have housing, it is a 2-bedroom, it can handle this many people. And when Catholic Charities got its list of arriving families that were really just based on the numbers that they had given to the government, we were able to place families of certain sizes in the housing that the teams made available, which is why what Kelly said about housing, I just want to underline that having housing has made this work possible, because it allowed us to have an ability to absorb people into teams that could support them, as opposed to just putting hundreds of people in hotels around town. And so in some cases that work has taken a little bit more time. The family that Kelly's congregation, that Elise's congregation started to support, they both went straight to the housing that the congregations had made available. In some cases, this is specifically true with the single guys who traveled. We didn't know where they could be. We didn't know if some of them were going to leave, or who to house together, or what the language matching needed to look like. And so in those cases, those folks ended up going into some hotels, and we've had these amazing hotel support teams that have been built up over time, which was really something we needed to kind of build in the interim. We didn't have that from the beginning. And so since those folks have arrived, congregations have stepped up once we knew who it made sense to place together, and they are now also being supported.
Thanks. I'm going to ask that question also to Richie, and I think I know the answer, but because Janet Applefield is one of our favorite human beings on the entire planet here at JCRC, I'm going to read it in full. As a Holocaust survivor, and having been a refugee myself, I am interested in becoming a volunteer. How do I do that?
Janet, I'd love to talk with you about the different ways that you could get involved. The first and easiest answer to this is that for anyone who is a member of a congregation, and especially locally, it's very possible that your congregation is already engaged in this work and supporting a particular family or set of individuals. If not, we have found ways to geographically match volunteers who have specific skills and interests to teams that might be supporting families or individuals in their area. And we're also going to talk later about ways that you can all be engaged in supporting this work at a higher level too. But I would be very, very happy to talk to you about ways to get involved.
And we will make sure to include how to get in touch with Rachie in the follow-up email for anybody who signed up for today's program. I'm going to throw the next one back to Kelly and Eliza Reberger, and actually build on that, which is what the support looks like for some of the volunteers in your network, because different volunteers come with different skills, different resources. You certainly, and we've spent a fair amount of time on the families that have literally opened up homes to the arriving families. And there's a question here also about like helpful hints. Where where are the partners? Who do you work? What have you learned? Are there special programs? Are there opportunities, particularly here in Massachusetts, for the volunteers? What might volunteering look like as people are thinking about what skills, competencies, assets they can bring to the table here?
I think from a macrocosm, we are already illustrating what we've already hit a really important point, which is there are specific infrastructures in place when paired with one another can do incredible work. So what is your gift? What is your charism? What do you have to provide? Start from that place. Because what we did as a congregation is we subdivided into subcommittees who all make up our power committee. And they were in healthcare, housing, education, and driving and paperwork. And literally, I mean, I guarantee every person listening to this webinar today would fall into one of those categories. I know a little bit about driving, how to fill in a paper. I know a little bit about how to English. Maybe I was a teacher. Maybe there's somewhere in those charisms, as we like to call them, where you would fit. One of the biggest challenges is not looking at the whole pie and saying, I can't handle the whole pie, because nobody can handle the whole pie. So subdivision of skills and assets is absolutely key. Eliza, what do you think?
Yes, I love that you guys have a paperwork team. We desperately need that. Like, there's so much that look, we also have subcommittees, but that is that we don't have a paperwork subcommittee. But now I'm thinking we need one. I think also, I just want to reaffirm, like, we don't know what we're doing. And I say that to be empowering, not to say like we have no clue or we're failing, but to say that every step of the way we're finding helpful people. So for instance, one of our volunteers took a family shopping to a halal butcher in Waltham, who happened to be himself a Somali refugee, who said he would hire our family because he remembers what it was like to be a refugee here, and he didn't care that they don't speak English and wouldn't really understand. He would do whatever it took, and before, he was willing to work with us in whatever capacity would work for our family. And so those kinds of connections didn't come about because we knew that he was going to be there, or because we knew, right? It just, in the process of daily life of shopping, you meet people and make these connections. And I think, the biggest things are taking advantage of the, Jewish Vocational Services or other employment agencies, the International Institute of New England, whatever agencies exist that can help you with experience, talking with other community members that are doing this work, and really talking with your family, knowing that your family is the expert in what they need. And you don't know, even if you think you have an idea of what's right for them, it's really important that they are driving the process.
I would love to tag on to that. Our experience, that to the point of being their expert in their own experience. When we really came to the knowledge that our family wanted to relocate to California, of course, it's natural for us to want to support them in the same way that we could have supported them here. So we reached out to lots of organizations, knowing that Catholic Charities had already received, to Rachie's point, the number of people they were allotted. So they could not take our family on as a part. They didn't have a caseworker for them. They didn't have that support system for them. So for us, there were moments where we were sitting with this family saying, you really shouldn't do this. This is a mistake. You know, your fridge is full because we put food in it. What are you going to do when you arrive there? And so in some ways, it's really being faithful that your instincts might not be what's best for them. And you really have to let them make the autonomous decisions on what is best for them. And that can be hard.
I really appreciate it. It's like, I think you've come back to this time and again, is that they know their needs and that they understand what they're trying to do. But I also want to, like, speaking of needs, and Elisa, you touched on in your last comment, and I see it in the Q&A as well. It was mentioned earlier that, you know, the goal here is for these families to be able to thrive and succeed and become fully, you know, successfully part of the American fabric. The adult language learning issue is definitely a challenge, and people are curious, and maybe this is for how can volunteers help, or what's being done in terms of helping people, helping adults particularly, do language acquisition and job search. And if you could touch on that, and then we're going to wrap up in a moment.
Yeah, so English learning super important. Our family, we've had sort of a multi-pronged approach. The men of the family were enrolled in a local English learning session that met 3 days a week for multiple hours. We also have a core team of English tutors that come to the house and meet with the women and with the kids and with the men. And we have a Google Doc where every English volunteer, this is super critical. If you have lots of people all working on the same thing, it's really important for everybody to know what has been covered and what they know and what they don't know, and what somebody worked on a little bit but they need a little bit more. So we have a Google Doc that's been very helpful for us. We've also, you know, the 5-year-old is enrolled in school. We have a preschool program that's this option for the 2-year-old, working with the family to find out what's right for them in terms of their little one, because she's very little and in a new country. But using all of those supports, and the biggest thing for us has been communication, and then putting together a multifaceted approach with jobs. They're working and they're taking these English classes and they're working with these volunteers. Kelly, I would love to hear what you guys are working on.
I actually would say that that's pretty much exactly our strategy where English learning is concerned. JVS is amazing, and we are blessed enough that a lot of our congregation had teachers, and we're willing to spend. And another challenge that just has to be mentioned, because it's not over, is the challenge of COVID, right? So we're still navigating that landscape. So there's some of our tutors are willing to be in person with the family, but the mask provides an added challenge, especially with language acquisition. And some are not yet ready to be in person. So we're, you know, teaching Zoom and learning via FaceTime and things like that. And so again, that going back to the flexibility piece is huge. But yes, we too have that essential Google document for all matters of communication, and language acquisition seems to be that two-pronged approach of one-on-one and group sessions.
Thank you. So we're coming to the end of our hour. We're not going to get to all the questions that have piled up in the chat, but they all boil down to some version of how can I help and how can I support this work? So I'm going to throw this over to Rachel, or whatever the plan is here, to wrap us up. And then I have some closing comments to share about what can we do, all of us here today, and those who are going to watch this video, to support this work.
Yeah, so there are several answers to this question. The first is that if you are a part of a congregation locally in the greater Boston area, there is a possibility that your congregation is already supporting a family or a group of individuals, and you can definitely reach out to me and ask, and I can give you more information. And if that's not the case, then as I mentioned before, we can figure out ways to connect you geographically to others who might need more support, or see if your congregation might be up for taking on something together. A second piece that everybody here can do, and this is actually sort of coming at this from a broader perspective, is that you might have noticed that we sometimes use different language around the legal status for this group of people who are coming. You know, spiritually and like experientially, this is a group of refugees. They are seeking refuge from a really dangerous situation. Legally, and politically, they are what's known as humanitarian parolees, which is a terrible term, but they have access to refugee benefits. But what this means is that they do not have any permanent legal status at the moment, even though they get a lot of access to those benefits and will have to apply for asylum if that is the status that they continue to have. But there is a bill in Congress that's making its way called the Afghan Adjustment Act, and that bill, if it were to pass, would mean that all of these folks coming would have permanent legal status, and it would make all of our teams' lives, and obviously the lives of all of these folks who have come from really, really difficult circumstances, lives much, much better. HIAS is having a call-in day to Congress and the Senate on February 8th to really advocate for the Afghan Adjustment Act, and we will send out information after this webinar so that you can get involved and make those calls and really recruit others to make those calls. And especially if you have friends in other parts of the country, if you yourself are in other parts of the country, please share this widely. We would love to really make it clear that our communities want this change to happen. I would also say that if anybody has any leads on work possibilities, employment possibilities, we do have the amazing partnership of Jewish Vocational Services with English classes, with work training, and we also know that connections in our community have made all of the difference in the ways that you heard, Eliza's story around the butcher, but also, people in our communities who are employers who might be sympathetic to this and have jobs to give. We are, as a network, collecting information about possible employment opportunities for everyone in the network. And lastly, you can offer financial support either to JCRC and also to the CJP Fair Fund. CJP has been a really incredible partner in raising funds that goes directly to the resettlement agencies in order to make this work happen. And Catholic Charities is a big part of the recipient group that gets that money and has it directly support all of the folks that we have been telling you about today.
Thank you, Rachel. And we've included in the chat a link to the HIAS site, and we will, of course, include information about all of those things and the HIAS mobilization in the follow-up email that all of you will get. I just want to end by thanking all three of you, Kelly, Rev-Eliza, and Rachel. You certainly inspire me and make me very proud to be a part of this community of organizations at JCRC and this network. And I feel like we've just learned so much today about the work that's being done. And I guess we just end with gratitude, not just to you, but to all the members of your congregations and the networks you are building who are really doing the work on a day-to-day basis. And thank you to our audience for joining us. I hope this was informative, and I hope that if you're not already involved in this work, you will be inspired to get involved. And I invite you to join us on February 17th in the next installment of our speaker series here at JCRC, where we'll be coming back to a theme we've been exploring in recent weeks, which is the story of our Jewish community. I will be in conversation with Ari Ferdig, the Executive Director of the New England Jewish Labor Committee. To register, you can visit our website. We'll also throw a link in the chat and include that in the follow-up. Thank you all for joining, and have a good day.